Got on my leather jacket Thriller. The show ain't nothing iller. Man, I'm a lady killer. If I want her, I'm a stealer. I promise I can make her fly away like caterpillars. So if you don't know by now, then you should probably get familiar.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's me, Leticia Remauro, and today I'm flying solo. Unfortunately, George got called away again, and it's a Friday in the summer, so I think I can handle this alone. Hopefully, though, you'll all write in questions and comments about the topics of today, what you want to speak about, and you know where everything is going around the country in New York. Well, I could tell you this. Today, Governor Cuomo actually announced that schools can open in New York. And I have many friends that are teachers, and I've heard from them, and they've had a real concern about the schools opening too soon. And they pointed to what happened in Mississippi. They pointed to what's happened in other places where schools opened and then closed. And they pointed out to me that that's not great for consistency for children. And I agree. Having a school open and close, you know, again, is not a great idea. And there's been lots of studies that say that it is more important for a child mentally and physically to actually get back to a normal routine and to go to school. And that outweighs the risk of the child becoming infected or the child bringing home coronavirus to the family. So on the one hand, I can understand teachers being concerned. I can understand people who have a child, but who also have loved ones who might be compromised, being concerned. And it all comes down to balance, right? This virus is something we've never seen before. We don't understand it. As it's going on, we're understanding it more and more. But when it was coming over from China and when we saw the deaths in Italy, it paralyzed us as a country, and we didn't know what to do. We had Governor Cuomo, you know, begging for thousands of ventilators, and we had President Trump, you know, invoking the War Act so that we could make those ventilators, and then we come to find out that we didn't need ventilators because we learned a little bit about the virus. And so there's two schools of thought about how to handle a pandemic like this. There's one school of thought that says, you know, let everybody get it, and then you have herd immunity, and some lives will be lost, and you know, you have to deal with it. The other school of thought is that you lock down and you try to save every life you can. So I guess I pose this question to you because there's no right and wrong answer, I don't think. It is about what we are willing to accept as human beings, as a nation, and how long we can stay in our current condition. So for those of you out there, tell me, do you think that the lockdown should continue? Have you been going out of your house? If you haven't been going out of your house, how have you been getting your food? And have you been able to go to doctor's appointments? And what do you think about the governor saying that schools can open? Are you afraid? Are you afraid to go, you know, back to teaching in a classroom? Would you prefer to see online teaching? How would you recommend, from everything you've read or watched? And I know we've all read and watched many, many things regarding the coronavirus over the last months. That's all most of us could do for the first month of the lockdown, no matter where we were in the country. The television was bombarding us constantly. So I know that we have educated people out there, and I'd like to have you weigh in on whether you think it's a good idea that children go back to school, or do you think it's too soon? Here's my philosophy, and here's what I think. And for those of you who don't know, I did have coronavirus. Not only me, but my husband and my grandson and my daughter had it. And we had it early on. We had it at around the third week in March. As a matter of fact, my birthday, my daughter's birthday was totally canceled, right, because of the virus. And not just because we couldn't go anywhere, it was canceled because we were all sick. And for me, it was like a terrible cold. For my husband, it was more like a flu, and for my daughter as well. And we all had it for different amounts of time. My grandson had it for just a couple of days, and he had the scratchy throat and fatigue, and he got over it fairly quickly. My daughter had it for about 4 days, where she was sleeping almost the entire 4 days, and she had the fever, although it didn't really go much over 101. She did have a fever. With my husband, he was bedridden almost the entire time. And he didn't have the cough. He was just severely fatigued, and he had no appetite. For me, I had it. He had it for about 21 days. For me, I had it for about 12. And at first, I thought it was allergies, because my nose was running, and I had this dry cough. And then that cough turned into such a violent cough that I wound up not being able to speak, because when I spoke, I coughed immensely. And as much as my husband would have loved the silence, he wasn't even out of bed to be able to appreciate it. I never had the fever, and we were all treated differently. My daughter had a Z-Pack because they thought that hers was an infection, a respiratory infection. My husband, when my husband and I finally was diagnosed with coronavirus, they gave my husband doxycycline. They gave me hydrochloroquine and a Z-Pack. And within 2 doses for both me and my husband, it was gone. Now, some people who heard that my husband had doxycycline as his treatment said that there was no way that in science that the doxycycline should have worked for my husband. But we both have the antibodies, and we both, tested positive. We had coronavirus. So why am I telling you all this? The one thing that my daughter, my grandson, my husband, and myself had was a loss of taste and smell. And that was kind of when we knew we all had it. And all of us were tested, all of us have the antibodies. So we got over it. I tell you this because there are many people that are very, very fearful of the virus because they don't know how their body will react. And I agree. There's something to be afraid of, especially when we've seen so many people perish from the virus. But the one thing I can say to you is my husband has COPD. So he has underlying factors, and he also has high blood pressure. I have high blood pressure. So both of us had underlying factors. The one thing that we did do was move. We did not lay down. Even my daughter did. She stayed horizontal basically for 4 days. But my husband, as tired as he was, he moved around. I moved around as well, because I decided I wasn't sick and I wasn't going to have this virus. And it wasn't until probably the last 2 days, when things got really bad for me, that I admitted that it was the virus, even though my doctor told me it was. But there's such a level of panic and fear that any underlying condition can kill you. And I've spoken to some biologists who study this type of disease, and what they've told me that they've learned is that it's not the virus itself that kills you, but it is really the way your immune system handles the virus. And there are a group of scientists now that think that the best way to handle the virus is to just let it run its course if you can, and to keep on moving. But that's, every doctor has to advise their patient accordingly. And I think the thing we missed when we closed everything down was that we didn't, our doctors, our physicians didn't have an opportunity to learn about the virus. And what do I mean by that? Let me tell you. My husband and I were diagnosed by telehealth. Okay. And they didn't want us at a testing center because they were so sure that we had the virus. So we couldn't go in to see the doctor. We couldn't go, they didn't want us to go out. The doctor didn't want us to go to the hospital unless we couldn't breathe. There were protocols in place, and I can understand them, right? You don't want, if you know that somebody is up and speaking and okay and is handling or tolerating the virus, you don't want them driving around going places to spread the virus, especially when they didn't know, how quickly it spread and how it spread. So we quarantined, okay, and the fact that our doctors couldn't see us or see more of us sooner, I think was a disservice to the physicians and to us, in that they couldn't compare the notes of the wide range of symptoms that we were all having. I mean, as I said before, the one symptom that we all had that was the same for all of us was the loss of taste and smell. But for my husband and myself, it hit differently. So this is all 2020 hindsight. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that, anybody did anything wrong, but now thinking about it, by keeping patients from the physicians, by not being able to see uh, a variety of people with the virus and how they all reacted, and being able to document it and being able to share that information, we may have retarded our ability to understand the virus better. Here we are now, right? That was in March. Now we're in August. And what we're seeing is that even with outbreaks, the medical professionals are able to better control the virus. There are far fewer hospitalizations from the virus. There are many, many more recoveries, far fewer deaths. And so I think that this is like anything else. The more you know about it and the more you can educate the public, the more that we can keep everybody safe. Which brings me back to the original question of, is it time to let children go back to school, in-person learning? There's a group of children with special needs that for them, in-person learning is imperative. Why is it imperative? Is because they get their services, their occupational therapy, their physical therapy, their speech therapy. They get them at school. And you can't do those things virtually for children with special needs, especially those children that are on the spectrum. So those children are usually in classes that are they're 6 or 10 or 6 or 8 or 12. So they're relatively small classes in a large classroom. And they have a teacher and a para, and some of the children have one-on-one paras. So for them, wouldn't it be smart for all of us to consider allowing these children to go back to school? And even if their teachers, or their specific teachers that were assigned to them, are not ready to go into in-person learning or teaching, there are teachers that are ready for in-person teaching. And if we could start with a smaller classroom group, to and open up the schools or separate the schools for those kids who most need the in-person learning, wouldn't we be doing a service for the children and for the teachers and for the parents? I was part of a big group on Monday of parents, and we stood outside the UFT and we asked for the president Mulgrew to, come up with a plan to get his teachers back to work and to get our special needs kids at least back to school. Now, before anybody starts yelling that I'm talking about making these children guinea pigs, this is absolutely not what I'm talking about. Currently, those children are going into their schools and they're having their one-on-one services with their therapists in the schools, in their classrooms. They're doing it separately, but that doesn't stop it from being there in that classroom with that therapist in person, observing masks and all the other things that need to be observed. Unfortunately, not every parent can take their child to these services because they work. And the way the school is handling it right now is, or the Board of Ed is handling it right now, is that during your appointment time, you have to stay there with your child. And if you have more than one child in more than one school, that means you're running all around to get these services. So it's not an ideal situation. But the fact remains that these kids are going to school in their classrooms and with their regular therapists getting their services. So if we could figure out how to do that, how come we can't figure out how to open the schools? We have some comments coming in. Where'd you go, Tony Ann? Here we go. Tony Ann says, my two sons live in PA, had it along with their wives, and my two granddaughters had it. Luckily, my husband and I didn't get it. We have autoimmune disease. So thanks, Tony. I appreciate your comments. Yeah, it's one of those things that, if you know somebody who has it, you most of them can describe what the symptoms are, and I think most of them have experienced different symptoms depending on, I don't know if it's age or blood type. We don't know that right now, but thank God they're okay. Thank God you're safe, and thank you for writing in. Where my mom is here. Hi, Mother. That's my mom, Josephine Nasazzi. And of course, Tony Ann is saying, hello, Grandma Joe. So they're having a conversation between themselves. So let's go back to education. So I think what happens is we're trying to cure everything all at one time. And we're seeing this. We're seeing this with the way that we're allowing businesses to open or not allowing businesses to open, because there's still industries that are not open, like gyms, and of course our schools, and we're trying to cure everything all at once, but we're not moving forward with a plan, and I think that that's frustrating a lot of people. And the plans, when there are plans, they seem to be off the cuff. For instance, anyone who is coming into New York City, or coming into Staten Island most specifically, might have run into sheriff's departments, especially if you were driving over any one of the bridge crossings. Why is this happening? Well, because Mayor de Blasio, the same man who didn't want to shut down the airports and who claimed that Donald Trump was a xenophobe when he said he wanted to stop travel and stop people from coming into Kennedy and LaGuardia and Newark airports from other country. He's decided now that he is going to put an extra layer of checking on people who are driving or coming over bridge crossings. He's got people stationed in the Port Authority bus terminal, in Grand Central Station, in Penn Station, and most specifically on Staten Island at the Outer Bridge Crossing and at the Goethals Bridge Crossing, and also at the Bayonne Bridge Crossing. And the goals, supposedly, of these sheriffs are to stop people who have out-of-state plates and to get them to fill out a form and to agree to quarantine for 2 weeks if they have traveled here from another state. And if you go on the mayor's website, you can see that there are about 35 states that are listed there. The interesting thing was that these sheriff department members of the sheriff department were actually stopping cars with New York license plates and New Jersey license plates. How do I know this? Well, because I spoke to someone who had a car accident and they had a rental car, and the rental car had Jersey plates. And she was stopped on Page Avenue and she was asked to fill out a form. And she explained to them that she, this wasn't her car, that she lived on Staten Island, but it took them a very long time to believe who she was and what was going on. And there was a lot of contact and calling her boss to vouch for it before they agreed to let her go. And this is problematic. Why is this problematic? Well, because if we're going to say to people, anytime you come over a bridge into New York City, or come by train into New York City, you're going to be met with this demand to quarantine. Clearly, nobody's going to come to New York City. I understand that the mayor is very happy that we flattened the curve. But if the mayor ever walked around Manhattan, as I did on Wednesday, you will see a ghost town. You will see that the tall buildings are empty, that there are no office workers. So with no office workers, there's no one to go to buy lunch. There's no one to go to shop in the area. There's no one to go to require service in the area. And so because there's no one in Manhattan, or very few people in Manhattan, all the restaurants that we saw with their sidewalk cafes were empty. And we went in for 1 o'clock and we left at 4 o'clock. And when I tell you that if I saw 100 people, and we drove from Worth Street all the way down by the ferry, over the course of that time. Well, if I saw 100 people on the street, and they weren't all at one time, that would be a lot. So there's a domino effect to this closure. And let me tell you what that is. So companies have realized that they can survive with workers working from home. And so they're saying now, why should I come back and rent double the space from my office? Because they need now double, because you have to have 6 feet apart. You have to have social distancing, right? You have to do special treatments and special provisions for your staff to keep them safe. So you're going to have to invest some money if you want to bring people back into the office. So bosses are saying, or owners of companies are saying, well, why should I do that? We've been operating all this time, and we've been operating, at home, with people working at home, and I don't have to worry about liability. I don't have to worry about harassment. I don't have to worry about investing more money into furnishings for the office, electricity, property insurance, all of those things. They can cut their cost of overhead dramatically and still operate their business. So why would they want to come back to an office building and need much more space, for social distance purposes, so that they can operate? They're not going to. They're absolutely not going to. So they're breaking their leases and they're reordering the way they do business. And when they break their leases and their employees are not coming into the city, all of the businesses that located near and around those big office towers, because they knew that their business would thrive from being, their establishments would thrive through the visits from the office workers, are no longer needed. And this is really causing New York to look decimated. And it is putting a big, big dent in the taxes that we are going to be collecting, that we're collecting now and that we're going to collect in the future. And what the mayor and the governor are not understanding, and I think it's mainly because they're businessmen. They're not businessmen, I'm sorry. They're politicians, and both of them have grown up, if you will, in their adult career in government. They're used to money just flowing in, and they're used to spending a lot of money. But a small business owner, or medium or a large business owner, understands that when catastrophe strikes, you have to reimagine your business plan, and you have to do what you have to do to save money, cut corners, and still operate, and to preserve the health and safety of your workers, because without the health and safety of your workers and your customers, your business doesn't work. You have no business. So we as small business owners understand that domino effect, and we as small business owners understand supply and demand. We understand what it takes to curb spending, and to still be able to put out a good product. And so that's what's happened with a lot of these businesses that were located in these offices. They recognize that their employees are safer at home, and they're at lower risk. So they've really reduced their risk, and they've reduced their overhead, and yet they're still delivering quality service to their clients. They have figured out how to reimagine their business plan to make it successful. You need to have that kind of common sense logic to be able to get over a disaster. And I fear that neither the governor nor the mayor have it. And I'm going to say why. Because if you compare New York to other states, per capita, our death rate was much higher. If you compare New York to other states, per capita, our hospitalizations were much higher. If you compare New York to other states, our lockdown was much more severe. And you don't have to take my word on it. There are studies out there that have been done that say that lockdowns are never good. Lockdowns are good for a short period of time to get your feet out, your legs underneath you. In our case, we needed to protect our hospital workers. We needed to make sure that they had enough equipment to handle the sick people that were coming into the hospitals. And so we did that. We needed to, get a grip on what the virus was doing and how it was spreading. And over time, we started to do that. We needed to make sure that we had support services for those people that were considered essential workers. And we were able to do that. But then about week 3 or 4, we started to recognize that the governor was allowing work on high-rise residential buildings, construction workers to go to work on high-rise residential buildings, but he wasn't allowing the small contractor to finish the job in someone's house. He was allowing people to ride the bus and go food shopping, but he wasn't allowing people to shop for other things that they may need, such as buying a pair of pants or buying shoes, because they had to go to work. He wasn't allowing people to operate their business and their service for the workers. Things such as nail salon, hair salons, all of these he did not consider essential business. But at the same time, you had people who you expected to go to work and had to go to work. Nurses, doctors, firefighters, police officers, food, clerks in supermarkets, clerks in delis. There were, people working in Walmart. Well, not in New York, not Walmart in New York, but in other categories, the pharmacies. All of these businesses depended on people coming to work. And those people that were going to work needed assistance. They needed daycare. They needed to be able to order food or shop for food. There were so many things that the quote unquote essential workers needed, that the governor then denied them because he thought that they were not essential. And the question started to arise amongst the masses of why is one business considered essential and not another? Why is it okay for us to, charge in a large group into a supermarket to, stock up on food and clear out the shelves while wearing a mask and gloves? But it's not okay for a small fashion shop owner to open his or her shop to sell that pair of jeans or that shirt to the essential worker who needs to, wear it for work. Why is it not okay for the smaller businesses to open to do business as long as they follow the precautions that the CDC had put out? Well, the governor said that, he just wasn't ready, and he engaged Connecticut, he engaged New Jersey, he engaged Pennsylvania, and they all agreed together not to do this thing. Well, when the rest of the country was ready to open, our area of the country didn't open. Our state didn't open. And neither did Jersey or Pennsylvania. And so our business people suffered. And yes, it was very nice that there was a $600 addition to the unemployment, but we saw what that did to the economy. We saw that even the businesses now that were considered essential services couldn't even get all their workers back because they were making more money not going to work than they were going to work. And there was always that fear factor, and there still is that fear factor. And I don't want to reduce it, but I do want to compare what happened in South Dakota, who never really locked down. They closed down somewhat in the beginning, but Governor of South Dakota decided that she trusted her citizens to do the right thing, and so those businesses remained open and they serviced their clients, and there was no spike there. And before everybody jumps on me and says, oh, South Dakota is no way the same as New York, you're right, it's not as densely populated in New York, but it doesn't make a difference if a cafe has a business model of needing a certain amount of money and certain number of clients per day or week or month to meet their business model, whether they're located in South Dakota or they're located in New York City, the business model is the business model. And so you're never going to be able to see a business thrive on one customer a day unless it is a hugely famous let's say hair salon that charges $1,000 for a haircut. The most regular mom and pop shops have a business model that includes having at least several customers per hour in order to pay their rent, their insurance, their utilities. So per capita, maybe it's different. I mean, I'm sure that a cafe in South Dakota is not paying the same rent as a cafe in Manhattan, but I can guarantee you that when you put the business models together, it's dependent on a number of people coming into the business at the same time, or one after the other, or within the hours. So you can match it up apples to apples, if you just do the math. So South Dakota did that. We did it in South Carolina. We did it in Florida. And when I say we did it in South Carolina, I say that because I have a condo there, and my mom, Josephine Nastasi, who has a lot to say today about Bill de Blasio, including does the mayor stay up nights thinking of these things? Who does the stopping? Mom, so the stopping is being done by the sheriff's department. And Tony Whitaker says he doesn't care, and he never did. And Tony, I think that the problem is with Mayor de Blasio is he thinks he's doing something right, but but his biggest problem is that he's never ever created a job. And that seems to be the problem with most of our elected officials. So many of them have grown up in government that they're removed from reality, and they don't have the acumen for small business that is necessary to understand a budget and to understand what it takes to create a budget and to create jobs. My mom says more money being spent on the city budget, and you're absolutely right, Josephine. And she says it's almost as bad as buying red paint. Okay, I guess that's a comment on the murals. Well, get it. Why I brought up my mom is because my mom lives in South Carolina, and my husband and I have our second home there, and we were there recently to help my mom and my stepfather, who was not well. And even we were there during the spike. And even though there was a spike, South Carolina's restaurants, everything stayed open. They mandated the wearing of masks. They mandated that the social distancing protocol be followed. And if a restaurant or a shop, an employee tested positive for the coronavirus, that shop was closed down. It was thoroughly cleaned, and then it was inspected before it was allowed to reopen. And I could tell you that they handled the situation fantastic. And they were able to keep whatever tourism they were getting. And that was so important to a small town like Myrtle Beach, because they live off the tourism, and that happens around the country, and that happens in other countries too. We're seeing Italy devastated, we're seeing France devastated, and England devastated, or small towns, quaint towns who depend so much on tourism, devastated because people aren't traveling. And we're seeing New York devastated because not only are people not traveling, but now we have a mayor that's saying, if you do travel here from somewhere else, we're going to quarantine you for 14 days. How's that work for vacationers? It doesn't. It doesn't work for vacationers. First of all, we have no hotels anymore in New York City because they're not allowed to reopen. And they're now filled with homeless people because the mayor thought it was a bright idea to spend $175 a day to put homeless up in hotels all around New York City. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of homeless. And the Department of Homeless Service said that they have now comfortably relocated 11,000 homeless people in hotels across New York City, including 4- and 5-star hotels. And what is that doing to the city? Well, let's talk about that for a minute. We already talked about the fact that the coronavirus in the commercial space is not being used because people are learning to work from home. And so because there aren't office workers, the surrounding businesses are suffering. But now you add to that a 2-week stay of protesters in City Hall Park who graffitied all of our historic buildings. You add to that pictures and video of protesters and rioters burning police vehicles, burning the flag, being violent, and you shoot that out across the nation. And then you top it all off with the fact that along Broadway and along Fifth Avenue and in many parts of New York City, homeless individuals are now located in hotels, hanging out on the streets and shooting up heroin in public and wandering around high after they've shot up. And you have a recipe for disaster in New York City. So I just today wrote a letter to the mayor, to the governor, I'm sorry, asking him to suspend the collection of property tax in New York City. And I want it suspended until all the schools and the businesses are open. And I mean fully open. The schools, he announced today that he wants to open them. And I guess it's now dependent on the teachers union and the mayor to come up with a plan so that they can be opened and they can be opened safely for both our children and our teachers. And we talked about that earlier. So I still want your comments. If you watch this later on, please add comments in the comment section, because I'll read them and I will be sure to pass them on. But we have the schools open, but we don't have any plan yet to do open phase 4 of business in New York City. That means that restaurateurs don't know when they can open up their restaurants, the insides of their restaurants. We do know that Broadway is dark until January. We just learned that Radio City Music Hall was not going to have a famous Christmas show. And we know that there are no hotel rooms for people to stay in, even if they did want to travel to New York. And even if they got a Airbnb, they would still have to face a 2-week quarantine before they were allowed to actually go out and enjoy New York City. So having said that, I think that what the governor needs to do is he needs to give an incentive to people to stay in this state. If anybody watched his press conference on Monday, he was literally begging people to return home from the Hamptons, from Long Island, from South Carolina, from Florida, from where their second homes were. And he said he'd buy them dinner if they came. Well, begging's not going to work. What would work is incentives. And we're desperate at this point. New York City is literally desperate at this point because we were facing a gaping budget deficit, as was in the city and the state. And then all the coronavirus, the protests, shooting is up, crime is through the roof. We've had as many or more shootings as of July 31st of this year as we had all of last year. So, the safety of New Yorkers and New York City is in question. So, there's just too many negative things happening, and it's a very difficult thing to overcome. So if the governor truly wants seniors not to pack up and move to their Florida or South Carolina or North Carolina house, if he truly wants families who, if they don't pay their property tax, can lose their house, if he wants them to stay, he needs to provide an incentive. And not only families, but that would go, property tax would go for small business owners too, who own commercial property. We need to have a suspension of these taxes so that we can truly feel like we're in this together. Because here's the thing. If anybody was watching the mayor or the governor on TV and on their regular press conferences, I know that no matter where you are in the country, that people do watch both of those press conferences because they want to know what's going on with New York City. You have heard both of them talk about the sanctions and the prohibitions and the retardation of the population, right? That we're not allowed to go in bars and stand at the bar or drink without ordering food. And we're not allowed to travel out of the state and come back in without quarantining. And we're not allowed to do this and we're not allowed to do that. But have you once heard either of them say that in order to preserve the integrity of New York City, we want to keep people here, and so therefore we're going to give you this incentive to ask you to stay? Not one. Not one. Well, they did do one. They said that if you pay your property tax late, the penalties will be reduced. It's insane. It's insane. We had mortgage companies who were deferring our mortgages. We had credit card companies deferring payments. We had everyone made a concession, right? Every entity made a concession to get us through this crisis together. And the only ones that didn't make a concession was government, especially New York City and New York State government. So Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio gave no concessions to their constituents to encourage them to stay here, to think of a new business, to think of a way, to do business differently in New York City, to maybe launch the next great idea. They never bothered. Well, I'm telling them they need to bother, because as a business owner, I needed to reconfigure my business plan for it to be successful during this pandemic. And it took work to make that happen. They need to do the same thing. New York City is a corporation, so therefore it is a business. And so it can be thought of as a business, and it can be handled as a business. And the best way to restart a business, if you will, is to get people in the door, so that they can see what wonderful stuff you have. And somebody said to me today, well, you get them in the door to New York City, what wonderful things are they going to see with the crime and the schools closed? And you know what? That's true. So maybe what we need to do is give the incentive to keep those that are here. And then we need to work on cleaning up our act so that people will want to come here again. Lucille Chavone has joined us, and she said that she heard that the teachers union wanted to defund the police. Lucille, I heard that as well. I didn't read it anywhere, but I heard it. And I know that that was the case in California. I think that the teachers union there were holding the school system hostage until they got the defunding of the police, and they got free college tuition and some other things. Listen, if that's the message that the teachers union is going to send to parents, I think that they're going to be in for a rude awakening, because the one thing that we do have an abundance of in New York State are quality charter schools and private schools and parochial schools. And many people would take their child and make the sacrifice to take their child and enroll them in a parochial school, or in a charter school for free, or a private or parochial school for tuition, in order to get them back to school, because we need a sense of normalcy. And also, people don't have the luxury of staying home to homeschool their children, especially essential workers like nurses and doctors and firefighters and police, who I don't even know if they are essential workers anymore, because I've heard, and I don't know if anybody else has, I'd love to hear from you, Lucille, maybe you heard, I heard that hospitals are laying off workers in drastic numbers. And that's being attributed to the fact that elective surgeries were canceled for so long. And also that people now are afraid to go to the hospital for elective surgery while we have coronavirus. And some hospitals haven't even restarted elective surgeries. So I'd love to hear more from you on that, if anybody knows that. But Lucille, my comment on the teachers union wanting the police defunded, I hope that's not so. I didn't see Mulgrew ask for that. I did see around the country that there was a movement by teachers unions to take police out of the schools. I think that that's atrocious, and I think it's horrible. And I think that we as a society should speak up against that, because if we do want a good relationship between our police department and our people of color, black or brown or whatever ethnicity you are, then we have to do that. We have to do that. Start that in grade school. We have to create that relationship so that there's mutual respect on both sides. So we've spent 49 minutes on this. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the debates. So here's where we seem to stand. So Joe Biden has agreed to debate. And he's agreed to the debate schedule laid out by the commission. Um, Donald Trump has requested that the debates start earlier because the first debates don't start until September, and early voting in some states start in August. So, what is your opinion of this? How many debates would you like to see? And when should they start? Here's my opinion. What good is a debate unless it starts before the voting starts? You know, the whole idea of a presidential debate is to have the candidates stand side by side with a moderator speaking off the cuff, taking notes and speaking off the cuff. Why do we enjoy debates, for especially for president? It's because it gives you a sense of who the person is. And I have to tell you, I think that Donald Trump earned the moniker of being aggressive and nasty and mean during the 2016 debates. And that's where he started naming the other candidates and, actually, becoming very, very super hyper aggressive. Um, it formed a certain opinion in a lot of people's minds. I think those debates also earned Hillary Clinton her MO, or proved to some people that she was a bit nasty, and that she could be quite um, intelligent and that she was certainly a strong woman who was very educated. But at the same time, I think those debates, showed her in her answers that she was not prepared to answer questions about Benghazi and about donations to the Clinton Foundation and to other things that were, especially her emails. So good thing, bad thing, whatever. So now we have a situation where we have Joe Biden and we have Donald Trump. And we've seen that both have made gaffes in public. We have seen that both are capable of speaking to their constituency. But I think that if you have to be honest with yourself, whether you're a Biden supporter, Trump supporter, or you're going to vote for someone else, I think that the gaffes that Joe Biden has made as he's speaking on the campaign trail have been of such a curious nature that it has exposed a little bit about him already. And yesterday, I don't know if some of you saw it, but yesterday he was comparing African Americans to Hispanics, and he said that Hispanics were far more broad in their thinking than African Americans were. And when I heard that, I was taken aback. And I recognized it immediately as a racist comment. But the news media hasn't portrayed it that way. As a matter of fact, they kind of covered it up. And soon after he said it, Biden tweeted that he wanted to clarify his comment, and he didn't clarify the comment. He said that he didn't mean to call African Americans monolithic, but the truth was he did. He didn't correct himself. It's things like that is that I think a debate will help shine a light on. It's things like frankly, President Trump, sometimes is very, very harsh and very, very mean. And a debate platform will show that as well. So I think that it's really important for them to go head to head. And I think that it's really important for them to do it before the first ballot is cast. Now, don't get me wrong. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a Republican, and I have voted for Democrats, but I won't in this election. And I won't in this election because I think that, frankly, Joe Biden is not the candidate he was or would have been in 2016. In 2016, there were many Republicans that I knew that would have supported Joe Biden for president. But the 4 years have taken a toll on Joe Biden. And right now, to me, I think it's shameful about what the Democrat Party is doing with him, because he's lost his edge, and he's lost his way, and he's lost his pattern of thinking, and it's becoming quite obvious. And I don't know why, and maybe it's a bad mix of medication, whatever it is, but the fact remains that we see that with his comments, that the old Joe Biden, who did believe in segregation, who didn't want to end segregation and bring children of color together with in public schools, still exist, and that's his mentality. We've seen the fact that he doesn't really understand cultures other than his own, and that culture is quite frankly Washington D.C. He's been there too long. 43 years is a very long time, and that culture in D.C. is not a culture where you see many people of different cultures, and you spend much time with people of different cultures, because let's face it, Washington D.C. Congress is made up of, the average age is what, 65-year-old white men. That's the majority of people that are in Congress. So I'm not blaming Joe Biden, but he's been in DC a long time. He's been traveling in a circle that has lost touch with reality for a long time. And so I don't think that Joe Biden was the best candidate that the Democrats could put up. And I want to go one step further. Okay, here's the thing that I don't understand. Kamala Harris is in the running as a front runner for vice president to Joe Biden. How come she wasn't the Democrat machine's choice for president? Wouldn't the Democrats have all been better off if they just ran her for president in the first place? I could tell you I have great respect for Kamala Harris. She's an army, she's in the army. I think she was a major in the army. She is, she's hard hitting. She's an intelligent woman. She's a senator that knows her stuff. She's new to the Senate, so she doesn't have that Washington stink on her, if you will. And I thought that she performed very well in the debates. And I had a really great respect for her, more than any of the other candidates in the Democrat debates on that stage. Yet she was pushed to the side, and none of the Democrat leadership thought to negotiate with her. They thought that Joe Biden would be more palatable to the voter, the at-large public. And maybe that's so. Maybe because of the Obama glisten, they thought it was better to have Biden than Kamala Harris. But I don't understand, if you're trying to get the African American vote, right? If you're trying to get the female vote, if you're trying to say, hey, we identify with you in the Democrat Party more than the Republicans, identify with you, and we understand you better than the Republicans do, then why did they put the African American woman in the second position when she could have easily been in the first position? And there is nothing in Kamala Harris's background that should have given the Democrat machine cause for concern. Much the contrary. She is a pillar, and she's smart, and she's a senator, and she knows how to speak, and she's a go-getter, and she's very, very energetic. But look, I'm not complaining, because I think the matchup between Joe Biden and Donald Trump is going to bode well for Donald Trump, and I think he'll be a reelected president. But I think that if the Democrat Party was true to what they say they are, if they truly cared about African American voters, if they truly cared about women, they wouldn't have relegated a competent, able-bodied woman who could have been elected president to the second position. Because we all know this, if Joe Biden wins the election, Kamala Harris is a heartbeat away from being president. So why go through the game playing, and why not just put her at the top of your ticket? That's a question that I'd like my Democrat friends to answer, because I feel like they're playing a shell game, and I think that that's to all of our detriment. Okay, we're over at we're at 3 o'clock now. We've been here an hour. I just want to acknowledge that Lucille says let me just see, a debate would give Trump votes. Biden is having communication issues. Lucille, yes, he is having communication issues, and that's what I think is necessary to see. I think it's necessary to see both men's characters shine and their ability shine in this debate. So at any rate, it's Friday. I hope you all have a really, really great weekend, and we will see you back here Monday at 2 o'clock. And hopefully George will be feeling better. So until then, be well. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Mom, I love you. I'll call you later.